You talked about thinking that America was this meritocracy and, oh, I followed the script. I did all the right
Oh, yeah.
things. I'm listening to you when you say, hey, maybe these folks need some directions. Let me get out to help. And you have
Yep.
this experience where you're targeted, you are harassed. And institutionally, the messaging is there's
Mhm.
nothing there. What did it feel like for you to move through that moment and turn that into your activism and building coalition with others and bringing groups together to get these things passed at the university? What did it feel like while you were working with others to get that done?
That's such a good question. I think after the initial moment of helplessness, working through all those emotions, I think the next emotion that came up for me was like, I got angry.
Mm,
And that fueled my work for a really long time. I was really angry. I kept showing up with anger. I remember calling my sister and just sobbing, and I couldn't get over the fact that I had been targeted simply for my identity. I thought I was somebody who was living with my heart on my sleeve. Of course, I followed the script. I was the sum of my accomplishments, not my identity, not my visible characteristics. We all learn about MLK in school, judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. I really believed in that. And I'm sure I went to school with teachers who really believed in that too, or would have wanted me to believe that. And so I felt so sad and helpless. There was a part of me that I had to grieve that part of that worldview, that really simple and nice worldview. And the next thing I felt was just anger that, wait, this terrible thing had happened. And you're telling me that there's no justice really to be had, whether that was just validation or healing. And the other thing too is like around validation, there's like a careful nuance I have around that is that it's one thing to feel validated and acknowledged, yeah, that terrible thing happened to you and it's not your fault. You didn't deserve that. But then there was also this sense of I also got this weird like pity validation of when I was talking with like campus security or like other adults around me that were like camp university leaders. There was also this sense of pitying, like, you poor thing. I can't believe that happened to you. As if I don't know, like, I can't really explain it. It didn't feel right. So then I was really angry, and I actually leaned into my angry identity for really a long time because I was hearing rumors that university leaders could not understand why I was so angry. Like, they were literally calling me the angry student, the angry Asian chick. I had been hearing rumors about that. I went to a really small campus. So, like,
mhm. And
so
word travels.
right? And it comes back around. And so they were like, we can't understand these students. And I think that's still part of the campus culture, still part of the local culture there. Is like, we have an office of inclusion and diversity. What else do you want? We've allocated resources and we have a director there. We have this space where like students of color to go talk about their thing. What else do you want? This is as good as it's going to get. And so I got really angry about that because I was like, I knew that because of the life experiences that I had, that was so different than the life experiences they had. Most of the campus leaders, I will say, were born and raised in the same town. I went to a rural university in Minnesota.
Mhm.
And, and so a lot of the folks were born and raised there and then ended up working for the university. Like they went to school at the university, loved it, and then became leaders. So I think there was also this sense of there wasn't exposure to like the broader world. Like I think it was really easy to be isolated. So they couldn't understand, okay, what else do you want? You just need to get along. And I remember just again, I was angry, but in my private moments with my friends, I would just cry about it. I was like, I just want to be seen and I want to be acknowledged as like this powerful person, this really empowered person. And I didn't deserve this. And that actually the world needs to change. It's not me. I don't have to sit here and accommodate this, but the world needs to change.
Mhm.
Oh,
As I'm listening, particularly you sharing about the role of anger, I'm just thinking about some of my own experiences. I was talking about this with a different guest too, but one of the quotes in some of my experiences that really resonates with me is James Baldwin's to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in this state of rage almost all the time. And it's not just that what happens to us, but also he said because of the ignorance or criminal indifference on the part of white people to act, to do something about it, to care. And in your sharing, you're hearing that university officials, leadership aren't understanding. like, why is this a problem? Why are you so upset about this? I'm thinking of some common parallels to this idea of the ignorance to your experience. And I'm thinking there's some disconnection there. You're disconnected from that experience. The piece that I'm also moved by, as Baldwin goes on to say, the work then is to channel that rage in a way that it does not consume you, channel it in a way that it doesn't totally consume you. And I've heard you share that you've realized in some ways that for you, that anger, it fueled you for a while, but it came to a point where you were realizing, at least in the way it was going, it wasn't sustainable.
Yeah, I think that anger fuels one of the things that I'm learning about anger. So I'm trying to also learn more about my own emotions and getting in touch with them. But one of the uses of anger is that it leads you to your sense of injustice. And that's not something to be discounted and valuing that. And then we live in a society that's actually really scared of anger, right? Not just in a society, but think about anger in our interpersonal relationships, right? Like at least in the family that I grew up in, right? It was almost like we were afraid to be angry with each other, right? And we had a hard time understanding each other's anger. So I see how anger plays out at multiple different levels and getting comfortable with anger within yourself, within your relationships, but also on a community and a national scale, right? We have to build the capacity to be able to hold our anger and understand what it's trying to tell us. And as I grew in my journey, I had to find other sources of fuel for this long march towards justice. One of the things that I did right after graduating from undergrad, 'cause I was one of those students who went straight into graduate school. And while I was in graduate school, I did my thing again. I started organizing again because I found out that one of the buildings on campus was actually named after a KKK leader. I went to school out in Oregon. In Oregon, just like Minnesota, where I'm from, has a long history of they have this image of white liberalism, right? And one of the things people don't know about Oregon is that Oregon actually used to have the highest number of KKK chapters. Right? That was like a thing. It was like a great thing like people did, right? It was like joining the YMCA in Oregon. Like it was a social thing that you did. And so one of the buildings on campus was named after a KKK member. And I found out that this was widely known, but students hadn't really, or not students, it was not really the responsibility of students to do this, but the university hadn't changed the name. And so I started organizing with graduate students on my campus as well as undergraduate students to get this name changed. And that also continued to fuel my sense of anger. I was like, why are these things not like are these things changing on their own? Like, when it's so visible, right? The thing that happened to me, right, might have been like a one-off or for specific circumstances, but here I was at a larger institution, greater diversity of students that they were probably recruiting from and bringing students into. And so I was angry there, but I also found out that anger is like good for a sprint, but not for a marathon. There were students on campus that were also organizing for not only better policies to support students of color, but the thing about the school building was just one more thing. And while I learned that while social justice work will always feel urgent, it also needs to be sustainable. And so that was when I started burning out a little bit. While I had worked with some campus historians to learn about the origins of this building and all that stuff, I also felt like when I was student organizing as a graduate student, I was dismissed in a certain way. And interestingly, not from university leaders, but by other students. I was a graduate student, so technically I only had a 2-year commitment. I was there to get my degree and I'd be out. Whereas like undergraduate students, they had double the amount of time. But also, I think we were in a phase of activism where, back in the day when DEI worked, there was a lot of affinity groups. There was a lot of, yes, we're all working towards justice, but it's not your job to do this, or you need to leave this up to like the Black students, is what I was told, right? It was
Okay.
like,
Okay.
didn't quite know. I was still fine. I didn't quite know how to respond to that because I was like, I'm doing this because I have this strong belief in justice. And I also believe that, yeah, Black student leadership needs to be recognized on campus because Black leaders are always the folks championing justice and liberation in its purest essence in a way. But I didn't quite know what to do with that. I was like, okay, this anger that I have about all these things is fizzling out because I'm being told that there's like kind of no room for me here. And so it made me pause and re-question, do I belong? here is this my march, or and I also like, do I get to define how I want to march towards justice, or am I here to? I think there's times where you take direction from others, but it led a lot of questions, and you can see I'm still struggling
Yeah,
to
I was gonna ask you, at that time, where did you land, in terms of what you did, and then where are you now? Even as you're making meaning of this as you're talking about it, where are
I
you?
at the time, I handed over the work. Like, I had worked with some campus historians. I had made it more publicly known about some of the research that had been compiled and, like, the need to change the names. I think I even helped write, I don't know, what are those things? An order or a decree or something for the faculty.
Like a list of demands or
Yeah, it was like a fact. It was not like a list of demands, because list of demands you can understand. It was more like a whereas we recognize and
Oh, yeah, let me see. It cou is it a degree? It's some kind of state resolution? Is it a resolution? Is that
yeah,
what they
a resolution. You're right. Actually,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't remember what. I ended up writing a resolution. I wrote a resolution for the faculty government to. It's the faculty equivalent of the student government. So anyway, I wrote a resolution for them to adopt. I wrote a resolution, compiled all the research, and then because I was told like you need to actually let the Black students, especially the undergraduate students, lead this. I handed over all of it. I was like, all right, I'm gonna hand it all over. I handed it all over, and then I was like, "Okay, I guess I'm not meant to lead this work on the campus level." And so then I turned my eye towards doing more within my own department and convened like what do they call it? Anti-bias, like, listening session between professors and students. And anyway, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not meant to lead this. Let me go focus on things happening in my department. And there's a lot of graduate students in this department, whatever. And at the time, I didn't even, my friends were actually more indignant than I was. Still, I don't know what the right thing to do is here, but I'm being asked to hand over all this stuff. And so here I'm going to do it. And my friend
Okay.
was like, "Well, you're the one who like did all this work and you're just going to hand it over." And I was like, yeah, I guess I'm not meant to lead it. So somebody else is going to lead it. Um, and now that I look back on it and how I think about it is I think that if I take the long view of like social justice movement, I was reading something by Angela Davis. I can't believe I'm going to forget her book. But one of the things that her book made me realize was that it was an amazing time and still is to be a student organizer between 2010 to 2016, which is like my
Mhm.
time span. There were so many movements happening, and there was the Occupy Wall Street movement that, like, raised our consciousness around, like, class and capitalism. There was the Black Lives Matter movement that raised our consciousness around, like, police brutality, policing, like, the justice system, the injustice system. Like, those were all the movements that, like, I was, like, soaking up and learning from, and then I look back on that moment, I was like, as a movement, we were probably still trying to find ourselves, right? In that time and space, folks still needed to grapple with their identities. Like Kimberly Crenshaw's work around intersectionality, people were still familiarizing themselves with those concepts of like multiple identities and therefore like multiple points of oppression and stuff like that. And so that's how I look back on it. I was like, that was a moment for me to also realize that we can't get to freedom by racializing ourselves in the same way that these like systems of oppression have racialized us or gendered us. I think it's important to understand identity, right? And understand your different identities. But nowadays, I pay a lot of attention to work by Ada Marie Brown, Raffo, like this amazing healing justice activist that's based in the Twin Cities, Bell Hooks, and other folks like that. I think another thing that was introduced to me that really made a big difference was learning about the three pillars of white supremacy, which is how capitalism and white supremacy are advanced. And it's through these three pillars around colonization, it's around imperialism, and it's around slavery. And that helped me understand all of our entry points into liberation might look different given our different histories, our different identities, but we have to understand the entire house and not just the one pillar that we're looking at. So that's how I think about it now is that there's a lot of um, entry points into justice work based on our identity and or personal histories. But it's also helpful to learn about the whole house and not just the one window that you're looking at.
It's helpful to learn about the whole house and not just the one window that you're
Yeah.
looking at.